Would you believe me if I told you that digital worlds can feel human? Yep, no controllers, no wearables, no touchscreens, just natural interaction. Welcome to Ultraleap, and welcome to one more episode of Builder Nation. For today's agenda, we have Miguel Rodrigues, Senior VP of Product at Ultraleap, the world leader company in midair haptics and 3D hand tracking. Welcome, Miguel. Super happy to have you here. Welcome to Builder Nation.
Hi, Elisa. Thanks for having me. So I'm Miguel Rodrigues. I actually joined Ultraleap just a couple of months ago. I started my journey more around TV and media. First, I went into programming and I thought I was going to build kind of the next big games that were coming up out there. But eventually I moved into more of the media space, started through architecture and then product, and then kind of loved product and continued all the way through, then leading product teams. And I think TV has always had this big appeal for me. So I've been, big watcher of series and movies. And I always wanted to have kind of a product that I felt people would love when they go home and they want to kind of be in their sofa and watch something. And so I've been building TV products for a very long time because that's what consumers were kind of asking at the moment. And then I think a couple of years ago, I started thinking that, the whole TV business was changing with the likes of Netflix, Disney, Amazon Prime. And I thought, where are consumers going? Where are people looking at the next thing that will drive this excitement? Where are the next products that people love? Where are they coming from? And so I started looking at VR as something that was driving in consumers. And then this opportunity came up. And so I jumped at the chance of being able to join a company that's at the forefront of doing XR in general. And so I joined Ultraleap. Ultraleap is this amazing company where we really believe that we can change how people interact with the world. We believe we can make it simpler and more natural. So we have the world's best hand tracking right now. And we have what we call midair haptics, which is this sci-fi feeling of you're not touching anything, but you can still feel sensations in your hand. And so when you put these two things together, you find a lot of applications where you can look at the interfaces of today and see how they could be transformed into something that feels a lot more natural. Today, we still use your mouse and your keyboard to do almost every interaction in computer. And we think the transition to something that feels more natural is coming, and we want to be at the forefront of that technology change.
Great introduction. I was actually going to ask you, how was that transition like? And you just told me. So thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah, in the TV space, you usually look at what is a problem that you can solve for people and how will you be able to build something that people will love and that they will come back every single day to your product and they'll feel that this is adding something to their lives. It might be saving them time so that they can be with their family. It might be just making their life easier. And so when I looked at having this kind of dramatic change into a different vertical, I thought, well, a lot of the skills that I have right now and a lot of the things that I've been studying and the people that I've been leading are actually very similar if I just change to a new vertical, because it's still consumers, it's still either the people, the enterprises that are working on this, but they're still looking to solve a problem. And so I was able to pick up all of these learnings that I've had in my past and then apply it just to this new kind of vertical field. The big difference for me has been that it's a lot more exciting. Things change dramatically and they change very, very fast. So it's not like you can sit down and look at where this is going and then have a discussion about what you're going to do in the next 10 years or not even the next 5 to 3 years. It changes super rapidly. And so you need to adapt a lot to that change. So talking with the customers, looking at what are the problems that they have today, how can I help? How is the technology that we're building today going to solve some of those problems? So I think the transition for me has been absolutely wonderful. Super happy to be able to be in this new field and kind of contribute to building amazing products that people will love.
How many teams are you in charge of? And how close are you with, let's say, the engineers who are like day-to-day close to the product?
I lead the product teams, and basically we have multiple businesses within the technology that we do. And so, for example, one of the core businesses that we work on is in XR, where you can think of the technology of hand tracking kind of the same way that you would think about touch in mobile phones. Using hand tracking is going to be that sort of moment for XR. When you have something that you're seeing in your eyes and you use remotes to it, it feels this very clunky experience where you're not naturally interacting the same way that you've been doing your whole life, which is with your hands. And so we found that not just enterprises and business cases, but also in consumers, there's a big appetite for using your hands. Sometimes younger people, so for example, my kids, if they're very young, they have a hard time with controllers. Sometimes they're too big for your hands. Sometimes, for example, my parents, they're much older. They take a long time to learn how to use controllers. And so using something that you've been using your whole life, which is your hands, is a lot more natural. And also at the same time, think of the interfaces. So interfaces today are 2D. They've been 2D for a very, very long time because we've all been looking at each other on screens. But the moment you can translate into 3D, then immediately you almost want to reach out and be able to interact with that 3D space. And so that's something you can only do if you have hand tracking. So that's kind of the first set of teams that I'm leading. And we're very close to engineering. So we have kind of vertical teams that have together product engineering teams and design and a couple of other segments. And then we have a team that is using also hand tracking, but on what we call out of home, so our retail space. So imagine if you are on the streets and you want to interact with the product experience or in a store, you can now do that without actually touching the screen. So some really cool use cases. It allows a lot more experience-driven use cases than you would have before. So that's kind of the second part of the business. And then the third part is haptics. So using these sensations that you can do basically with ultrasounds, how can you drive those sensations into something that you don't feel today? So imagine when you're grabbing something in VR, you can't feel anything if you're grabbing, for example, a window, moving it to another place. But now if you add haptics, you can suddenly have that feedback of when you've actually touched something, even though it's not there. So there's a lot of potential there. The line of all these teams, what they do is there's an interaction between usually a computer and a human, and we're looking at how do you break the boundaries between those interactions? How do you make them much simpler so that you make people's lives much easier?
I would like to ask you about the actual products. I know that you guys have the Ultraleap Stereo and the Leap Motion Controller. What's the main difference between all of them?
If you look at some of the challenges that I was mentioning, what we usually do is if you already have a headset, so imagine you're someone who provides a headset, what you would do is to make it easier for people to try out the hand tracking, we've developed the hardware that you can just basically stick on the headset and immediately we'll integrate it. There's a cable that connects and you can use hand tracking. So even if the device did not have hand tracking, we have a really fast way of just enabling that capability so that you can then use all the applications that have hand tracking. And so, for example, we have a lot of customers that do VR training, which is something really getting huge these days. One of the best use cases is we had Lufthansa training the assistants on board with VR. But if they were using controllers, they were building that muscle memory of what to do if something happens. And so using your hands, they could then get approval to do the training in VR because they were now building that muscle memory. And so they knew exactly where all the cabinets are, how they should teach people what to do, how to put the life vest on, how to open the doors and all of that. And so when they go for the first time into an airplane, they already know a lot more than someone who did not have that training. And so a really easy way of doing that is you just stick one of our devices into a headset, and now all your training that you're already doing in VR can be done with hand tracking. And so that's kind of one of the products that we've built to enable the people that want to do this kind of business. The second product is kind of picking up that device, but putting it inside of other people's hardware. So we do a deep integration into basically any headset. And so when you send out your headset, it already has our technology inside, so you don't need to have an extra hardware component. A good example of that's going to come out later this year. If we're looking a little bit into the future, later this year, we're going to see the Lynx that was just announced, and it's a mixed reality headset that doesn't even bring controllers when you buy it. So you just put the headset on and you use your hands to interact with the headset. So really one of its kind, super innovative. The team there is doing an amazing job, and they're basically going to come out already with this technology included into the headset that our team has been working with them. So that's kind of one of the best examples of a very natural integration into what mixed reality can be. And in mixed reality, looking at your hands is super important because remember, you can see your hands, you can see the world around you. So it's very important that it's very accurate, that you don't feel like I just touched something, but the system hasn't really understood that you're touching it yet. So it's very important that this accuracy and having kind of the top world-class performance of hand tracking is super important. And so we're seeing more and more people coming to us because they're understanding that this shift from VR to AR is kind of asking and being more demanding of the capabilities of hand tracking. And so they're coming to us as the best solution for that. And so that's kind of the second product, is kind of dematerializing the device, the hardware device, and putting it inside of the headsets. And then we have a couple of other products. You can do the same hand tracking with a similar device that you can put, for example, on your laptop. You can build your own applications and doing hand tracking with those. Some people use it in commercial applications, in stores, in experiences. Other people use it, for example, inside to track what you're doing in your hand, for example, if you're writing or painting. So there's a big development community around these devices, and that's our Leap motion controller device. And then we have a couple of products for enterprises around this hand tracking. On the haptic side, on the auto side, we're building a product that car companies can put sort of like in the center console, or where it makes sense in the car, to be able to translate all of these controllers that we were talking about that nowadays are super confusing, to removing them completely and just using haptics instead, so that you can click buttons, change switches. For example, say I want to turn right, instead of clicking actually a physical element, you can just, for example, do this motion and you feel that you've actually touched something that isn't there. So you've actually felt you touched something and you signal that you want to turn right. So that sort of thing, I think, is where we'll see the future of many of these interactions. And I think we're one of the few that is actually doing this at a very robust, mature state, that it can now go into what is one of the most secure segments that exists out there, which is the car industry. So these are kind of the primary products that we're building today, and they all have like a mix of hardware and software.
Now that you're mentioning that Ultraleap is both a combination of hardware and software, what would you say the main challenge is talking about the hardware side?
It's hard to imagine when you look at things today, specifically when you look, for example, at a headset. A lot of people will say, well, that's a giant thing that I need to put in my head. I'm never going to use that. And so the biggest challenge is actually seeing how that technology in terms of hardware can move and become much smaller and be a lot more comfortable to the user, so that you can then start having more and more use cases. So for example, we're now talking here, but if you think about that work relation that, for example, you have with your colleagues and I have with mine, if you have kind of that virtual connection, and a lot of people today are working in a hybrid model, sometimes from home, sometimes from the office. If you could just have some glasses that you put in and you look to the sides and you can see your colleagues that are usually next to you in the office, that would be easier than having something gigantic in your head. But for that to be possible in terms of hardware, there are a lot of challenges that need to be solved. And so these have to do not just with having components to be much smaller, but also, for example, how much power supply do they take? Do they have the best quality so that you actually feel that people are there? These are some of the challenges around VR and AR that people are looking at now. So increasing the quality of what you're capturing, the world around you, having better sensors to track at a higher accuracy what you're doing, especially with your hands. How do you take the least amount of power possible so that you're not cumbersome in the whole equation around power? So those tend to be kind of the biggest challenges in terms of hardware, because we are still at a very initial phase of XR. And so the people who are looking at this in a visionary way, they're looking at, well, I need to abstract from all the problems that exist in terms of where the technology is today so that I can find the uses for this in the future.
Technology is growing and advancing and everything is moving so fast. In a couple of years or in a couple of months, this challenge that appears to be really hard and difficult at the moment might not be.
Yeah, exactly. When you look at, for example, where we see that this is going, if you look at some of the cool things that are going to come up next and some of the challenges that are going to come up next, I think we can imagine that right now people still look at headsets, but you're starting to see in the market more and more people coming out with just normal glasses. And so I think we can see a world where technology will become much closer to what your reality in your day-to-day is. But when you have that, there are a number of challenges that we need to fix. So you need to look at almost all of these challenges together and seeing how you can solve many of these problems. But we're seeing that glasses are kind of the nice milestone in between that will probably bring more and more consumers into the space. So I think that's the challenge to solve for the next couple of years.
I don't know if you can share something about what are the next steps for Ultraleap. Are you guys planning on expanding, going international, something like that?
We are already international, so we have offices not just in the UK, but also in Silicon Valley. The two things that we are going to come out this year, they have to do exactly with what we believe the market is going. So links to this new mixed reality headset coming out is where we're spending a lot of our focus on. We believe it's going to be a massive launch and it's going to change a lot of how enterprises are dealing with their businesses today. And then looking at glasses, I think that's something, if we talk about the future, that we'll definitely be looking at, and how early we can start thinking about some of these problems that we were mentioning. It's surely going to have an impact in whatever we do in the future. So I think looking at these challenges that people have in their lives will impact a lot kind of what we do. But these are kind of the two big focuses that we should keep an eye out for in the next couple of months.
And last but not least, Miguel, do you have any advice for future entrepreneurs or VP of product in the industry?
I do. I think instead of just looking at the business around revenue and how can I kind of grow 10x from where I am today, what I felt in my experience is that you should focus on solving the problems that people have and having a product people can love. And a lot of the times we talk about kind of this MVP approach, the minimum viable product. But instead of that, if you change that slightly to kind of the minimal lovable product and say, what is one product that I can build that people will love, and it really solves a problem in their life. So if you're someone who's starting out there and you believe you have your business case all figured out, by all means, that's very important. But don't forget that you need to be adding value into this equation that is people's lives. And so if you focus on doing that first, then I believe the rest will come.
Thank you so much for that piece of advice. It was great indeed. Thank you so much, Miguel, for being here today, for sharing your experiences with us, for sharing your perspective with us. Do you have any social media handles? Where can people find you or Ultraleap?
Yeah, LinkedIn is the best place to find me. I'm there constantly. Our company has a website and multiple handles in all the platforms, but LinkedIn is still, I think, the best place right now.
And remember, guys, that you can also find more information, interesting articles, interesting interviews, just like this one with Miguel, direct on our website, controlhub.com/builder-nation. We would love to hear from you. And once again, thank you, Miguel, for being here, for joining Builder Nation today.
Thank you so much.